Welcome back. One of the migrants from Venezuela accused of murdering 12-year-old Jocelyn Nungaray in Houston last week. He will be in a Texas court this morning. The other accused murderer was in court yesterday, where the judge set his bail at $10 million, determining that he was, in fact, a flight risk. New court documents allege the suspects lured Nungaray under a bridge, where they stripped her naked to the waist, tied her hands behind her back, and assaulted her for 2 hours before strangling her and throwing her body in a bayou. One of the suspects was wearing an Immigration and Customs Enforcement ankle monitor at the time of the crime. The death penalty is not off the table, we understand, as both migrant suspects face capital murder charges. Joining me now is Missouri Congressman Eric Burlison, a member of the House Oversight Committee, Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, and the Education and Workforce Committees as well. Congressman, thanks very much for joining me this morning. This is such a horrible story, and our hearts go out to her family. Your reaction?
Well, this is not the first, sadly, and it probably won't be the last. Just in the last few months, we had Elizabeth Medina, and we had Maria Gonzalez as well. As well as the high-profile case of Laken Riley, and these are horrible stories that really underscore this situation. You look, we just had a report come out from Judiciary that made it clear that we discovered that whenever they are reviewing unaccompanied minors, they're not looking through the criminal background of these unaccompanied minors to see if they might be a member of a gang. And as you know, the gang members that are the teenage age, which would qualify as unaccompanied minors, are some of the most dangerous individuals that might be entering in the United States. But sadly, we're not even checking that. So this is extremely disturbing, and every American should be screaming from the rooftops.
Of course, and you know, we've had how many people on the terrorist watch list already that have been apprehended? I know it's almost 400. 350 people on the terrorist watch list that have been apprehended. Imagine those 2 million gotaways that we talk about that weren't apprehended at all and just got in. This has become a leading issue for voters, and certainly it's a national security issue, but will it come up at the debate on Thursday, where President Biden and former President Trump will go head-to-head during Thursday's CNN presidential debate, Congressman? What do you think?
I would be surprised if CNN brings up this question in the debate. If they do, it'll probably be done in such a way that gives a softball to Joe so that they can dispel it. But I think that they probably are going to try to avoid this topic. Look, one of the most uncomfortable moments of the State of the Union was when President Joe Biden could not even pronounce the name of Laken Riley whenever questioned about it. So I just don't look. Let's juxtapose that with President Trump, who is actually calling the families of some of these victims. I have constituents in my district that told me that they felt very comforted whenever they received a phone call from the former president. That's the kind of caring nature that President Trump has that really can juxtapose that with Joe Biden, who doesn't even acknowledge that he has a granddaughter.
Yeah, well, I'm wondering about that and the mental capacity of Joe Biden, given the recent gaffes. I spoke with the former White House physician, Dr. Ronnie Jackson, on Sunday. He's a board-certified emergency medical physician. He was at the White House 14 years during the Bush administration, the Obama administration, and the Trump administration. He took care of all of those three presidents. And here's what he said about Joe Biden, questioning his mental capacity, and he's writing to the White House to demand a drug test. Watch.
You certainly don't have to be a physician to the president to see what's going on right now. So I have sent 5 letters previously asking for President Biden to submit to a cognitive test, very similar to the one that President Trump got while he was president. And all 5 of those letters have gone completely ignored. So tomorrow I'm sending a letter to President Biden, to his physician, Dr. O'Connor, and I'm CCing his entire cabinet. And it's embarrassing that I have to do this, and it's really embarrassing as a former White House physician to have to do something like this.
I mean, it's pretty incredible that Ronnie Jackson says Biden will have been at Camp David for a full week before the debate, and that they're probably experimenting with getting doses right, giving him medicine ahead of the debate. Is that what you think?
Yeah, I think that, any patient that truly, or, elderly individual or someone that has dementia, they can find some moments of clarity, right? They can find moments throughout the day that they have energy. And I think that Trump's team should not underestimate Joe Biden and his team's ability to whether they're going to jack him up on Mountain Dew or whatever it is. That, look, the State of the Union this year, he had a lot of energy for about an hour or an hour and a half, but it doesn't mean, what we're seeing is obviously throughout the day he can't carry that level of energy. When he's out and about, we're seeing that decline. So, but I certainly would not, if I were the Trump team, underestimate their ability to do whatever it takes to make sure that he's focused for one or 2 hours that he's on the debate.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I know a lot of focus on that. So we'll all be watching how the two handle themselves. They're going to be standing up for 90 minutes, in this debate. But I want to ask you about what's going on in Missouri, because you've got now 2 federal courts blocking President Biden's student loan bailout after a lawsuit from several Republican-led states. The court rules last night coming from District Judges Daniel Crabtree in Kansas and John Ross in Missouri. The Biden administration now cannot cancel any more federal student debt for borrowers enrolled in the SAVE plan, a program that ties how much somebody pays each month to their income. It would have cost taxpayers $475 billion over the next 10 years. It's already cost taxpayers billions because he blew off what the Supreme Court said already. The Supreme Court said it was unconstitutional, and yet here we are talking about it still because he keeps forgiving student loan debt, Congressman.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I think we all recognize that we should not be paying for someone's mistakes or the decisions that they're making. I didn't have anyone pay for my student loans. I think that people ought to take responsibility for the debt that they incur, and that is a common thing. He didn't have the power to forgive the loans. Congress didn't give him the authority to do so. And I was really proud to see Eric Schmidt, at that time the Attorney General of Missouri, take a lead role in suing the federal government over this. And I think it's too bad that we have to go that route, but I'm glad to see that the courts have ruled, wisely.
Yeah. Emily, your reaction?
Congressman, I'd love to take it back to immigration, if that's okay with you. Last year, you and many conservatives argued for a regular order process on funding the government so we could get conservative policies on things like the border put in place going into government funding. But this year, a lot of your Freedom Caucus colleagues are calling to pass a continuing resolution and sort of go home without doing that work. The Homeland Defense Bill or Homeland Appropriations Bill is on the floor this week in the House. Do you plan to support it or push any policies to deal with the border in that process?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, we're going to take the fight that's in front of us. I think that we're marking up a bill. We should mark it up to be the most conservative bill that benefits American citizens. I think the strategy that you're referring to regarding a CR is recognizing that these bills are likely going to end once they're passed in the House. The Senate is not going to take them up. We all know that. We all know that that's what's going to happen because it's happened that way for the last 27 years. And that's the way it happened last year. We marked up these same bills, and the Senate didn't take them up, and they pushed us all the way to the end. So if we're going to be pushed to the end, the thought is that we don't want to handicap an potentially incoming President Trump with a full year of his term already expired, where he can't make decisions about the budget. If you do a CR that ends very quickly into President Trump's term, then at least he will have all 4 years to make a decision about appropriations.
Right, we understand. All right, Congressman, it's good to see you this morning. Thanks so much.